Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and today we're going to be discussing all the books that I read in May. So let's just jump into it. So May was an interesting month because for the first half of it I was not working, and then I can't remember the day I went back, but for the last 2 weeks I have been working, and it did impact my reading a little bit. But I am happy with the amount of books that I have read. A good majority of them got 3 stars or under, so that's a bit of a bummer. So I'm gonna, I guess, cut to it, do this as quickly as I can. And yeah, I read 10 books. Let's talk about it. The first book I read in May, which is wild to me that I read this in May, is The Right Swipe by Alicia Rye. This is an adult contemporary romance that focuses on a woman who is the owner of a really successful dating app, and then the romantic interest is a former football player. Before the book started, they had this like one great night of passion, and then he ghosts her, so she gets real pissed, and then they cross paths again, and he wants to try and make up for it and explain why things happened. There are some things that I really did enjoy about this story, some things not so much. I liked our main character, Rhiannon. I liked that she was forward direct and was pretty brutal, honestly. She was willing to do what it took to achieve her goals, and she wasn't going to compromise or apologize for that. And I actually liked our love interest as well. He has some things that he's working through, some grief. Speaking of which, I would like to put trigger warnings for grief, like loss of a parental figure and sexual harassment and abuse. I liked the discussion of abuse and harassment and having to work with your abuser and all that kind of stuff, and the minefield that it is to be a woman and a woman of color when your abuser is in a position of power. That stuff was really good, well handled. I appreciated it. My biggest issue, though, was I didn't understand entirely why these two wanted to be together. They always were talking about what happened in the past and how great that one night was, but I wanted them to focus a lot more what was going on in the present and their future. There are a couple instances of the alpha male protective thing, but I don't think I hold it against this book, especially because our main character is confronted by her abuser, and so our love interest kind of helps and steps in a bit, so I don't hold it so much against this book like I do in other scenarios. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. I do recommend it, but it's not one that I am obsessed with. One book I absolutely loved though this month was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This book is so fascinating. It focuses on these 2 families and how they get intermingled and interwoven into each other's lives in a suburban paradise. I thought it was masterfully put together. This is my second Celeste Ng book, and the way she writes her stories are just phenomenal. She has such present themes and a great overarching narrative, and the way everything fits together is just so well. But she doesn't hit you over the head with what she's trying to say. She trusts the reader to interpret what she is attempting to say, and it's just so well done. And I love that this book was basically shitting on white liberal feminists. Had a lot to say about white feminism and how a lot of people were just happy to say vote for Hillary, and then they sleep very well and they think they did their part. And it just shows how flawed that thinking is and how you need to be intersectional, and it's just so good. It is so good. I would give a trigger warning for anything related to pregnancy. If you are sensitive to abortion or unwanted pregnancy type things, I would maybe skip this story. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Loved it, really impressed, and I will read anything else Celeste Ng decides to put out. I read An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is a book I've been intending to read for years now, and I'm a bit confused / I have some mixed emotions overall of this story. This focuses on this fantasy world that is heavily inspired by the brutality of the Roman Empire. Our main character Leia is a slave And she is obviously in the lower class. She is treated poorly, and she actually has to go undercover in this empire to free her brother from this terrible empire. Our other main character is Elias. He is a member of this empire. He is training to be like one of the, basically the police force, or like the highly trained assassin police force of this empire, but he actually wants to default to run away because he doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. Their paths cross, things happen, and there was a lot to like about this story, but it does stumble and fall with its execution. I liked a lot of the ideas and concepts brought to the table. I liked that the story wasn't shying away from some of the brutal nature. I would give some content warnings for like rape, abuse, slavery. There is some definite triggers in here. I think the characters were rushed. I think we could have honestly maybe gone the whole book without our characters interacting that much, but their relationship trajectory I thought was again a bit rushed. I don't think that there needed to be so much romantic stuff going on at the very beginning, especially because this is a 4-book series. I do like that this was very engaging and quick paced. I flew through this story and was invested in the characters' lives. I did genuinely care for what was going to happen to them. There's also some sort of like a trope or recurring thing that happens in the story that really bummed me out, and that really affected my enjoyment. It has to do with some like other beings coming to the rescue a bit too often for my liking. It happens multiple times throughout one book, and so I'm just nervous to see what the rest of the series might hold in terms of like that kind of stuff. It was decent, and I'm interested to continue. That's what we're going to land this on, so I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was Want by Cindy Pon. This is a young adult sci-fi futuristic dystopian. It takes place in a futuristic Taipei with Taiwanese characters, and that is own voices rep, by the way. But it basically focuses on like class and how the richest of the rich are able to sustain long lives, and then the poor class dies super young because the environment is just like utter garbage, and our main character decides to infiltrate like the rich people to bring it all crashing to the ground. But again, this is a story that I think falters at the execution. For the start, it's a short book, and I listened to this on audio, but it took about half of the book for like the plot to get going. For like, I know what's supposed to happen because it's in the synopsis, but we've barely even gotten started. Our characters felt very flat to me. The side characters were supremely underdeveloped, and our main character Jason was okay, but he also felt very one note. He's very motivated by vengeance, which fair, good motivator, but you don't get to know a lot about him or like have many different sides with him. And the constant description of boobs in this story from the perspective of our teen boy made me want to like lose my mind. This story simply didn't work for me. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars. It was very lukewarm, and I thought this could have like been knocked out of the park. I managed to complete 2 books for Tome Topple, which I wanted to do more, but I'm happy with the way it panned out. And the first one was The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. I'm so happy I finally finished this fucking book. This series, or at least the first trilogy, is done, and I'm happy because it was 4 years in the making. This was like everything I wanted it to be and more. This was a phenomenal conclusion to a series that I'm so impressed by. I'll actually be doing a full trilogy review. Hopefully I'm filming it today, but we'll see. So that will be posted in the next few weeks on my channel, and I'm excited to do that. This was everything I wanted it to be, and like more. The scale and the scope of the story was just huge. It was so like nail-bitingly frightening and breathtaking, the things that were going on. The twists and the turns here were just so shocking, and I could never get a grip on what I thought was going to happen. And I also really managed to care for the characters this go around. I have mentioned before that I think 2 of our main characters in here are incredibly flat, and I think that is still the case for the first 2 books, but I am very happy to say that I really started to care for them here, and their relationship together, it finally felt realized. I'm very excited to continue on in the Cosmere. I've purchased, I think Elantris is coming to me hopefully soon, but it's coming from the UK, so we'll see. I love this story. 5 stars. Pretty freaking epic. The next thing I read was Emma by Jane Austen. I think I finished this somewhat decently into the readathon. It's a 2-week-long readathon, but this felt like pulling teeth. And when you're trying to make progress on a book, a slow classic that is densely written at times is not the way to go. I guess I'll say quickly, Emma is about a young, really rich girl who is determined never to get married, but she decides that she is going to match make all of her friends because she introduced a match together and she thinks that she's really great at it. But all of these matches start to blow up in her face and she kind of has to deal with the consequences. Some of the hijinks and things that go in here I thought were really fun. I liked the fact a lot that our character was flawed. Do I think it's a bit dramatic that she's one of the most hated characters in literature canon? Yeah, she's not terrible. She just gets into some mischief and is very, very privileged. I do think this book was far too long for the story. We could have chopped out a lot of it, and there were a lot of just super, super long paragraphs. I understand that they were to make fun of the society and people that she's with, but God, was it painful to read a 2-page long paragraph, and the run-on sentences in here was wild. I also wish there was more of the romance in here. I wish it had developed earlier because of the length of this book. It doesn't get cooking until pretty much the end. I did give this 4 stars, 3.5, 4-ish stars. It's my least favorite of Jane Austen I've read so far, but I did enjoy it and I'm happy to have read it. I very quickly am going to mention The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I'm rereading this series because the final book is coming out at the very end of June and I have a review to put up of the second book still, so I decided to get cracking on this. I reread this via audio. This is reread number 3 for me, and I love this series. It's so good. I have a full spoilery review for this one already if you want to check it out. It is a great book, but I fear this is going on too long, so we're just going to move along and check out my review because trust me, I recommend and love this series and I can't wait to see the conclusion. So I kind of went rogue for my TBR and did some procrastination because there was a book that I desperately didn't want to finish and it took me 2 fucking whole weeks to finish this book. So I went rogue and I picked up The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. This is also an adult contemporary romance. It follows a Brazilian girl, which I believe is on Voices Rep, who has a wedding business, but the catch is that a few years ago she was actually basically left at the altar. She ends up having to work with the person who ruined her wedding and sparks fly. This story was fun even though the setup is ridiculous and the kind of mental leaps and bounds that you have to take for the story to do is a lot. It is a lot to wrap your head around. The dialogue was rough and choppy and their back and forth didn't work for me at all. It was just so jarring. They would insult each other and then be friends and then they were insulting each other on the next page. It was really, really weird. That being said, I will always love a sort of enemies to lovers sort of thing. And there's also there's only one bed trope in here, which is fun. I liked our main female character a lot. She was a pretty fleshed out, well-rounded character. Our main male character I found him to be flat. His goals were basically all motivated by his brother and his rivalry with his brother, which I just didn't think was necessary to the story. I loved the family dynamic with our main character Lena. That stuff was great. The sort of ending climactic thing goes exactly like you think it would, so I wish some expectations would have been subverted at least a little bit. I read this really quickly though, super fast, and I gave it 3 stars. This month was a bummer with ratings. Just wait till we get to my last 2 books, because the next book I gave 1 star and I fucking hated it, and that's Daughter of the Siren Queen by Trisha Levenseller. This is the sequel and finale to the Daughter of the Pirate King duology, a book I read about a year ago. I thought it was really flawed. kind of a mess, but I really liked the sort of romantic tension between our two main characters, and that stuff was fun. So I said, you know what, screw it. I already have the sequel. I'll continue on and finish the series. I think this book was essentially hot garbage. It is not worth reading, in my opinion. Our main character is one of the most insufferable main characters I've ever read from. There's some really, really weird notions in here in like both the series of consent, and like in the first book there was a weird like justification for rape that was very upsetting. This book definitely feels like it was written within a bubble, and like larger things were never considered, societally speaking, thematically speaking, any sort of world building stuff like consequences, all this stuff was never considered. The plot was bland, there was zero growth between any of the characters, and the one element I liked from the first book was not here. It was just this weird back and forth, will they, won't they, her kind of forcing herself upon him nonsense that I was not a fan of. I gave this 1 star. Even though I probably read this within the span of like 2-ish hours, I still feel like that was time wasted. And if that doesn't show you how much I think this book sucks, I don't know what will. And the final book I read, the book that took me 2 weeks to finish, even though it's only 400 pages. Side note, I had no idea this book was 400 pages. I just thought it was a tome and actually started reading it during Tome Topple because I thought it was so much longer. So I basically hated Nevernight by Jay Kristoff, and I feel misled by basically all of BookTube. But it was written like this like 16-year-old edgelord nonsense who thinks they're being dark for like edginess's sake, and I could not stand the way this story was written. Also, the metaphors used in this story and some of the writing choices, just in terms of prose, was ridiculous. Some of the prose I actually liked, and I liked the way Jay Kristoff was writing certain descriptors, but I marked here some of the most ridiculous fucking weird writing choices. Oh my god, I hated it. I might review this and like give examples if I feel up to it. I literally just finished this last night. Needless to say, I'm unimpressed. The events that transpire in the story I think are fine, but I'm just very put off by the writing style, so it's hard to be objective with what goes on in the story. I don't think our characters are as good as people tend to make them out to be, but I am willing to say that things could definitely change throughout the series, and there could be a lot of growth and stuff there. The world building I thought was decent, but there's also a bit of a cheat, again, because of those footnotes, and I like that that added to the world, but reading a 3-paragraph footnote on like a minuscule part of the world, I think is a bit of a miss in terms of world building, at least in my opinion. I really liked our little demon cat character though. He was fun, Mr. Kindly. I like him. And I'm bummed. I don't know if I'm going to finish the series. I gave this book 2 stars, so I'll have to see if people didn't like it and then continue to see what they say. I am bummed. I thought I was going to love this book, and I did not. But I am actually interested in watching Pierre Ford's like adaptation. She did the YouTube adaptation and she loves the series, so I'm excited to watch that and see how she interpreted it. But I do think the book sucks. Of the 10 books I read, I only gave 4 books an over a 3-star rating, and one of them is a reread. Let me know your opinions on any of the books that I read. If you have opinions on Nevernight, I'd like to discuss that. Hopefully you didn't like it too, because I feel like I'm the only person who didn't like this story. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!